Hey, what's up guys? Dave here from CNC 3D. So today we're going to be doing a fun little CNC project, which is also a bit of a tech tip here. We're basically going to be taking a look at a real world situation where we have a particular problem and we need to make a solution for it. So I'm going to be taking you guys through today a simple way for you to be able to come up with solutions to certain problems and use your 3D printer or your CNC to come up with a solution to that problem. So I'm going to be taking you through the method that works best for me, and today we're going to be doing a simple project where we are basically going to make a pole mounted toggle switch that we can use to turn some LED lights on and off on a boat. So we need something that's going to be able to hold the toggle switch, and we need it to be able to mount onto a pole, and we need a way to be able to fasten it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead now and take some measurements of our switch. We're going to take a look at the power cable that we're going to be using for it, and we're also going to be taking a look at the actual pole that we're mounting to and finding out a way that we can mount it. So the best thing we're going to do for this one, to make it simple, is we're going to make it so that it can be attached with some cable ties. So let's go ahead now and do all of our measurements and then come back and let's go and create the solution that we need. Alright, so let's just go out here and measure our pipe. So we've got our Vernier Calipers. Let's just put this on here and see. We have 25.12 mil. Alright, so basically a 25 mil pipe. So let's go ahead now and measure up our switch. Okay, so here we are now. We've got our toggle switch and we've got a good old-fashioned pen and paper and some Vernier calipers here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get the measurements of this toggle switch to make sure that our enclosure will actually fit. So let's just go ahead and move this pen to the side. We're going to write down some numbers in a minute and we'll go turn on our Vernier calipers. So first of all, let's get an idea of the width of this switch to make sure it will fit. So we have 29.4 millimeters there. So we'll go 29.4 mil. And then now let's go ahead and measure across the sides here to the widest point. And we have 15.84 mil on there. So 15.8 mil should be close enough. And then now what we want to know is the distance between where our actual flange here is going to mount versus where the bottom of these actual spade fittings are, to make sure that it's going to fit. So if we give ourselves about 30 mil, that should give us sufficient clearance. So I'm doing this one a bit arbitrarily because it doesn't really matter exactly what the distance is between these points here. So we can just leave it. I mean, it's about 27, but we'll give us an extra 3 mil just for the connector that we choose to put on there. So we need 30 mil high. Okay, so now we have our dimensions of our switch. Let's go and check to see how big our hole thread needs to be. So we'll grab onto the thread. So that's 11.77, so we need to make at least a 12 mil hole for that there. So hole, 12 mil. And that's pretty much all the dimensions that we really need off this switch. So let's just go ahead now and fire up on our computer and start making our enclosure. So we've gone ahead and taken all of our measurements. So now we're going to be using a free program called TinkerCAD, which is provided by Autodesk. You just have to go to tinkercad.com and create an account, and then you can actually go in there and you can start to build some projects. Now, TinkerCAD is designed for making 3D models, but it is a very, very simple sort of web-based program that we think is really, really functional. I mean, if you have a look here, you'll see certain things that I've actually designed within TinkerCAD, like our dust shoes. We've got a foam cutter. You guys have probably seen our power supply covers. We've got a VFD mount as well, which you've also seen. The old limit switches for the Queen Bee upgrades. and a few other handy little things. So It is actually quite a powerful program. We're going to be covering the basics of it. So at this stage, all we've done is we've just logged into our account. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just create a new design. Now in TinkerCAD, you'll see that you've got your main plane here in the center. You can obviously zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. You can hold the right mouse button down and you can drag around, and you can select objects with the left mouse button click. So we're just going to pretty much get straight into it. So we know the dimensions of our toggle switch. So let's cover some of the basics on how you can actually use TinkerCAD in order to make models that you want to make. So the first thing that we really need to start with here is we need to start with an actual housing. So we're going to go over to the right hand side here and we're just going to add a box. So we're going to click on box and we're going to drop that somewhere down here onto our canvas. So there's our box there. As you can see, it's 20 mil by 20 mil by 20 mil. So it's basically a cube right now. And so we're just going to go ahead and we are going to create this cube to the right size. So we've gone ahead and we've measured up our switch, and we've determined that on our switch it is 29.2 mil wide. So we need it to be at least an absolute minimum of that with a little bit to spare. So let's go ahead and try to make this box suit. So our switch was 29.43 millimeters, and the width of the actual switch itself was 15.77 millimeters. Let's say 16 millimeters to give us some space. And then we also needed a height in order to be able to get it to clear of at least 30 millimeters for us to be able to fit the actual toggle switch inside there. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll just go ahead and let's get the shape that we sort of want it to be. So we're going to change this width here. So we need to make sure that we have an adequate wall. So we want to go with a wall of 3 millimeters just to make sure this is a nice and sturdy switch. So let's make it 46 millimeters wide, and we'll drag that to the middle. And then on the depth side, we're going to make this 30 millimeters wide. And for our height, we need it to be at least 45 millimeters just to give us a little bit of clearance there. Whoops. So to do the height, you can just click on here and we'll do 45 millimeters there. And so now we have ourselves a little box on here that we now want to make as our main housing. So while we've got this shape here, let's just go ahead and add a bit of a radius on here just to make it look a little bit tidier. So we're just going to give it a little bit of a radius there, probably about 1 on the scale here on the right. And now we've pretty much got our main housing that our switch is going to be sitting in. So now what we need to do is we need to create a void in the center here that we can fit our switch into. Now the way that TinkerCAD works is it's based on the principle of add and remove. So you can take a shape like we already have here, and this is a solid. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make one of these. If you want to, we can choose this box option again. And we're going to make this a void within this shape. So to do that, we're going to click on here and we're going to change it from a solid into a hole. So that means that this becomes like a void that we're going to take out of this shape over here. So if we have a close look at this shape, so we're 30 millimeters wide and we're 46 millimeters across and we're 45 millimeters high. So let's just first of all make this shape here, and you can just drag on this. Let's just make this much taller than it really needs to be, because we need the top of this box over here to be completely open. We don't want that to be closed at all. So now that we've gone ahead and done that, let's just go ahead and adjust our width. So if we want a 3 mil wall, and we're 46 millimeters wide, then that means we need to make this here 40 millimeters, which will give us 3 millimeters either side of our shape. Now if we have a look at our width, we're 30 millimeters wide, so that means that we now need to go ahead and make this over here 24 millimeters, which will give us 3 millimeters either side. Alright, now that we have those aligned, what we can do is we can also lift the height of this. So this is our zero plane where this workspace is. So we can choose to click on this little arrow and hold the mouse button down and drag it up 3 millimeters. Now as you can see, we've got 3 millimeters over this side. And so that means that we're going to have a 3 millimeter bottom on the inside of this shape as well. So now what we need to do is we've got our void that's going to be going inside of our actual shape. So we're going to click on this void and we need to position it so it's right in the middle of this shape here. Now the easiest way to do this is to quickly grab one of these little rulers at the top here. So we'll click on that and we'll put it down onto our canvas. So now that we're on our canvas, you can see that it gives you a couple of options. You can choose to use the midpoint, or you can choose to use the end point. Now we want to use the midpoint. And the reason why is when we click on this shape, these green lines here from this ruler 0 position will actually tell us exactly where the center of this shape is in both directions, proportionate to this ruler. So we could move this ruler around and you can see that those numbers are definitely moving. So we're going to put them there. So to make it really simple for us, let's just get that at, so we've got 29 millimeters there. We'll make that so that it's 30 and we'll move it up. So we've got 30 millimeters in from this point here. So that's where the center is, 30 in and 30 across. So now if we click on this shape, we can click down on here and we can make this 30 and we can make this over here 30 as well. And what that has done now is that has actually put this shape right into the very center of where our other shape actually is. So now what we can do is we can just dismiss this ruler. So we'll just click on the little X here. And then now we will drag and select both of these shapes together. And then up the top right hand corner here, you've got the option to group. So let's just click on group. And then now, as you can see, it has removed that void from inside this shape that we've created. So now that we've gone and done that, we have the main body housing that our actual switch is going to sit into. So the next thing to do from here is we're now going to take a cylinder, which is already a hole. If you want to, you can choose to make it a solid, but we're going to make it a hole. Now, I personally like to increase the number of sides to the maximum, so it's a nice and smooth hole. And so we are now going to drag this here, and we're going to drag it a little bit lower than 0, just to make sure that it's below our actual work plane. And we need to position this right in the center of this shape again. So the same as before, we're just going to put a ruler down on here. And we're going to take a look at the middle of this shape. So it's 28 by 24. If we click on this, let's make this 28. And we'll make this 24. And that has now put our little circle here right inside the very middle of our shape. So just as we did before, we'll dismiss the ruler. And we're going to drag over here. And we're just going to hit the group button at the top. Now, as you can see, that's put a beautiful hole in there. But the one thing that we didn't do is we didn't adjust the actual size of this circle. Now, I've done this intentionally just to let you know that it's very easy for you just to hold Control and press the Z key to undo what you've just done. And then what we'll do to save us as we resize this little cylinder in the middle here, we're actually going to put a ruler down, and you can put it anywhere you would like. And as long as you are set so that you are using the midpoint, any adjustments that we make to this size will automatically center. just by us having this ruler down here. So it's worthwhile keeping a ruler there. If you ever need to adjust the size of something from the middle, make sure that you are set to midpoint so that you are using midpoint and not endpoint, and then it will adjust the width from the center. So at the moment we're 20 mil wide. Now we know that our switch has a 11.7 mil diameter on there where it threads on. So we are going to basically adjust this so that it is 1 millimeter bigger. So we have a little bit of space there. So we'll make that 13 mil, and then we'll change the width to 13 mil. And now we have a much better fitting switch on there. So let's now dismiss our ruler, and we'll select both of our shapes here again. And we're just going to group them together by hitting group. So now we've gone ahead and we've corrected the issue with our shape. So at any point, if you've grouped something or if you haven't sized something correctly, you can always just Control Z. Alternatively, we'll just regroup that. You can actually ungroup shapes as well if you wish. Just keep in mind that if you do choose to do the ungroup shape, if you have already made a custom shape that you want to then use as a hole or a vacant area in a larger, in like a larger model, then it will undo all of the grouping there. So it's definitely worthwhile just hitting Control Z to undo the move that you did. You can also hit this button at the top here where it says undo. And of course you can go forward with Control Y as well, or by hitting this button here. But we want these to be grouped, so let's just select these and group them together. Now we've got the basis for where our switch in here is going to mount. So what we really need to do now is make the solution or the part that is actually going to attach onto our pole. So we've gone and we've measured our pole, and our pole is 24.76 millimeters in diameter. So for all intensive purposes, let's just say that it's 25. So we need to make a little flange across the top here that's going to be able to hold some cable ties on there that we can attach. So let's go and make another cube down here. And this time we're going to put a nice little radius edge on there just so it looks a bit tidier, 1.26. And we want to make sure that this shape is now wider than this shape is for our design. So let's have a look. We've got 46 millimeters across the bottom here. So this needs to be at least probably say 60 mil. So you can choose to adjust. Let's just keep this. So we need this to be the same size. So this is 30 mil. So let's adjust this to be the same width. So 30 mil. And then let's go and adjust across this side. So that's 46. So let's just go here and make this say, I don't know, let's go 60 to give us a bit of flexibility with what we're doing. Now, what we want to do is we want to have a recess in the top here that we can mount onto the top of our switch. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to use the little arrow here to drag this up a bit higher. Let's just zoom out a little bit there. And we're going to drag this across so it's roughly in the center of where our shape is. Now what we'll do, we're going to grab our little ruler again, and we're going to try to position this shape so that it's right in the middle of our main shape underneath here. So if we look at this shape, we're at 56 and 28, 56 and 28. And then now that shape and this shape are pretty much together. So what we can do now is we can go and we can get this shape here to fit and carry a channel across here that will also fit our cord. So let's first of all lower this down so that these two sides blend together a little bit better. And then we'll close out of our ruler. Now, looking at this here, I'm not sure if we've got enough room for our cable ties. So let's just put our ruler down here again, and we'll click on our top shape here, and we can adjust the width of this so that it will adjust from the center outwards. So We're 60mm wide at the moment. Let's just take that out to 70. And that gives us a little bit more room on there for our actual cable ties to hold our job. So that's looking pretty good right now. The shape's on top of itself. I think we've got a good basis to work on. Let's go and grab another void cube over here. And we want to make this just much wider than this shape is at the top, because we need to basically cut this radius edge off the top to get it nice and flat, and then we can work on getting our channel in there. So we're going to adjust the height of this upwards. Now you can choose to measure this exactly and get this into the right spot, but for all intensive purposes, I just want to get this close enough so that we can just trim the top of this shape off, and then we should be able to go ahead and adjust our job. So let's get in a bit closer. We'll drop this down a bit to say halfway through our shape. That's looking pretty good. Might just give us a little bit more height just because we need to compensate for the radius of that pipe. So that's not too bad. Let's just go ahead now and dismiss our ruler. And we will select all of this and we'll group it together. Alright, so that has now made a solid shape for us to work with. Now we need to go ahead and basically remove the void on the inside here. Now we've got a couple of choices with how we can do this. We can either choose, because we technically have a void if we zoom in and we get inside this shape, if we can, you'll see that we do still actually have a void inside here, but we've now put this top on here. So we can either choose to go all the way back out to the start by hitting Control Z, or by selecting our shape and ungrouping things. And that has now ungrouped pretty much everything in here that we originally did. So in this case, it's taken this out of here, it's adjusted this here. So we might just choose now at this point in time to ungroup this again. Let's just get that back into position using Control Z. Perfect, that's where it should be. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to ungroup the other shapes that we had inside here already. And the reason why we're going to do this is because we want to be able to get this to come out all the way through the top here. So you can see there's our original rectangle inside this other one just here, which is now appearing. So what we could do now at this point, this is what we're going to do. We are going to select this shape and this shape exclusively. So I'm going to click here and hold the Shift key and then click this other shape, and we're just going to group these together. So just these two red areas here. And then now that that's done, we are now going to click on our rectangle that we made at the top here, and we're going to hit Shift on our red area as well, and then now we're going to group these together as well. And now that we've gone ahead and done that, you can see that we've cut our top off in the same spot, and now we have our void here in the middle. This is now one entire shape as opposed to two separate shapes. So if we select this shape here and hold Shift and select this shape, we can then now group these together. So now, as you can see, we're exactly back to where we started, but with our nice little flange on the top. Now, I am sort of showing you guys, I guess, the many different ways that you can do things within TinkerCAD. You guys can find easy ways to do things, complicated ways. I'm just going to show you the way that works best for me, and hopefully you guys can use that to sort of get started in coming up with your own solutions. So back to our project, we've got our little cylinder here that we created earlier. So we can either choose to drag and select everything now because we don't have any other rogue shapes outside of our shape, or we can click on our shape in the middle and then hold the Shift key and select the other one. And then now let's group those together. So we've gone ahead and we've now grouped this, and there we go with our main body that we want to use. So now obviously we need to go ahead and make a recess for our actual pipe and our cable. So let's go ahead and make one of these cylinders here. And let's make it the width of the actual pipe. So let's go 25 mil by 25 mil. And we can choose to rotate this. So when you hover over, you'll notice the little arrows here. We can actually rotate that to a particular angle. Now, if you want it to go to a precise angle, while you're holding the mouse wheel down, make sure to keep the actual, let me just get that back to normal here, Control Z. So if you move the mouse inside here, it moves at fixed angles for you. If you drag outside of here, it will do to the exact degree that you want to do. Now you can choose to obviously click in here and adjust this to 90 because we want this cylinder to be on its side. And we want it to be, now that we've got it on the right side following the rest of our job, let's extend this out so that it's larger than the whole job itself, so that it will clear these edges across the top. So we can now drag this upwards, and we want to get the top of this to be centered across the top here. So let's go and take our little ruler here at the top right again, and we're going to take a look at where this is. So what is it, 53 mil by 28. So let's make this 53 by 28. And then if we drop this down now, you'll see that it is starting to cut into the top of our shape. Well, let's just go and dismiss this ruler. Alright, and if we just swing around this side, you can see where we're going to be making a cutout in our channel here on our chassis. Now, we want to make sure that we still keep this switch relatively strong, so we've got to be careful with how far down we choose to go. But if we do drop it down, let's see how that's looking. That's still looking pretty sturdy. Well, sorry, let's just increase our amount of sides on here as well, so it's a bit smoother. That's better. And so that is not looking too bad. I think we might just elevate it slightly because we still need to run a channel for our cable on here. So that's looking pretty good to me. So now what we'll do is we'll select this shape and we'll hold Shift and select our main shape, and let's group those together as well. And there you go. We now have the ability to mount it onto here, and it's very, very simple. Now the last thing that we have to do is we just have to worry about the channel for our cables. So this is obviously going to be pressed up along a pole here. So we need to be able to get our cables across these channels. So let's just go and make a little rectangle here. And let's just put it up here. Now the width of our cables was about 6 millimeters. So with the figure 8 cable that we use, so let's just make that 6 millimeters there. And let's just make this 100 mil, just so we're bigger than our job. And we can now move this into the center of our job again. So to do that, we've now raised this shape up to roughly the right position. We'll add our ruler down here. We'll take a look at the middle of this shape, so it's 40 and 30. So we'll click here, let's make this 40, and let's make that 30. So that's right in the middle, which is great, it's already at 30. So now what we need to do is just lower this down so that it will actually go, let's just dismiss this ruler to make this a bit easier to see. Alright, so let's just lower this down slightly so we can just see it going into our shape. So there it is in there, it's just touching the surface there. Now the actual width of our cable in this case is roughly about 2 millimeters. So if we click onto here, we can actually adjust. All I've done is I've held my mouse down on here and slightly moved it. And then now we can adjust this down. So we want it to go to 41 from 0. And as you can see, that's a little bit too far for what we've done. It's going to cut all the way into our shape. So we don't want to do that. So let's just go here and adjust this back up a touch. We just need to make sure that our cable has a little bit of clearance in here for us to be able to run it through. So that's looking pretty good now. I would say we should be right for us to go and merge these together. So let's just drag and select all of them and group. And then now we've given ourselves a little channel for us to be able to run our cables through. So this is looking pretty much good to go at the moment there. This will be a nice little solution to our problem. So let's just go ahead and export this job. So first thing we'll do, we're actually going to give the project a name. So up the top left-hand corner here, let's call this boat toggle switch. Let's call it boat pole mount toggle switch. And now we're going to click on the export button over the side here. And we're going to export this as an STL. So we will save this file. Alright, so that's now successfully exported. So we're going to be using today one of our Creality Ender3 Pro printers that we do stock. So what we've done is we've already gone through on the SD card supplied and we've installed the Creality Slicer. Alright, and there we are. So this is the first time that we're running the slicer on this machine. So let's hit get started. Just accept the user agreement. And then now we need to choose our printer. Now we're using one of our Creality Ender3 Pro printers. So let's just have a look through this list and see if we can find the Ender3 Pro. So Ender3 S1 Pro is what we're using today. So all we got Creality Ender3. Okay, so Ender3 Pro. So this would be the right one to choose. And we'll just go next. And these settings should now be all correct for us to use. So this should be exactly the same. We've got a standard extruder on there. There's no offsets or anything like that. It's just a very simple setting for us to go through. We'll stick with all of the defaults. And so now we'll just go next. Now we're in the Creality Slicer here. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up the model that we've made. So let's hit open at the top left here. And we'll navigate to our downloads. And here is our boat pole mount toggle switch STL file. So let's hit open on that. And now it's put it into our little work area down the bottom here. Now, we've got a couple of different ways that we can choose to actually do this print. So one of the options is we can choose to print it this way, which would mean that these areas underneath here will have support structures going up and down in order to make sure that these sections here will always stay nice and straight and come straight out. Now this will actually make for a faster print, so we are going to choose to do it this way. The sacrifice is that these areas in red underneath here, they are going to be a little bit rough looking if we don't do any sanding afterwards, but that's fine because that's where our cable ties are going to go. But if you wanted to, you could choose to obviously flip the shape around and print it the other way. It just means that you're going to have a support structure in the middle here. So as opposed to having it in here, we would rather have it on the sides and make this a much faster print. So we're just going to have a look at the standard settings on here and see what we may need to change. The first thing that I would like to do is I would like to change our infill. Now by default it is set to 10%, which means that any solid areas, for example the walls of this structure or these areas just here, on the inside, they're only going to be 10% full, and there is a particular pattern that it usually likes to do. By default, it will just do like a line pattern in there. There are a couple of different options for you, but we want to make this just a little bit sturdier. You know, it's going to be used on a boat. It's going to be carrying a toggle switch. We really don't want it to break. So let's just go and increase our infill. I'm going to go to 60% on this, because I would like it to be very, very strong. If we wanted to, we could do 100%, and that would make a solid part. But let's just go ahead and leave it at 60 for now, and that should be pretty good. Now, The next option under here is the ability to add supports. So we definitely want to add supports because that is what's going to keep these top areas nice and upright for us. And then the next question is, do you want to do any sort of brim or a raft? Yes, we do. So what that will do is that'll make a nice base around the bottom of our 3D print, just to make sure that it definitely sticks effectively. So we can also choose to go to custom, and this will give you a lot more options in here. One of the things I like to do is increase the wall thickness. So at the moment it's 0.8 mil. I like to make that about 1.2 mil thick, or even 1 mil. So the best thing to do is to choose multiples of your actual filament that you're using. So we're using 1.75 mil filament with a 0.4 mil nozzle. So 0.4, 0.8, 1.2. They're all multiples of our nozzle size. Now, the wall line count here. So this is the number of walls. If you actually hover over each setting, it will tell you what they actually are. So we're just going to leave this as a default of 3. And if we have a look at our top thickness, so that's how thick our top is going to be. That's also important. So the top and bottom thickness, let's also make that 1.2. And that will make the bottom also a 1.2 mil shell and the top a 1.2 mil shell. So where that's going to become important is on this area just here, where it's going to be supporting the whole switch assembly as it's being bumped around in normal sort of boat usage. So we'll leave that as 1.2. Now the top and bottom pattern, you can choose different things that you want to do. We're just going to leave it as lines from now. And so there's no, let's have a look through at some of these settings. There's probably not much else you really need to change. So let's just leave that as the standards. We'll have a look at our infill options here. The infill pattern is set to lines. You can choose to do a grid, or you can do triangles or trihexagons. There's all different patterns that you can use, and it really depends on how long the print's going to take as to which one you choose and how strong the overall part will be. So I personally prefer to just use the grid option in there. I find that to be quite a sturdy little structure. You can choose to explore some of the more cool looking ones like gyroid, which is designed to resist movement in all directions there. We don't particularly need a lot of that to happen, so we're just going to leave it as a grid option. Now, we pretty much need to set our temperatures here. So in here we've got our material section. So the material that we are using is PLA Plus today. So I typically like to run the PLA Plus at about 240 degrees. I like to have a build plate temperature, so this is your actual heated bed on your machine. We'll leave that at about 50, so 50 is perfectly fine for that. And then the flow, we're going to leave that at 100%, so there's no need to really change that. The rest of the default settings on here, the print speed of 50 millimeters per second is probably going to be fine. Leave all these values as they are. Everything will be saved at this point as well once we get out of here. So let's just go ahead and just close out of here, and that should retain all of our settings. Now all we need to do is pretty much just hit slice down the bottom here. And then if we go to preview, it will actually give you a view of what you should expect on the output. So we can now choose over here to save to file. So we'll save that to our downloads. Let's make the name a bit shorter and we'll just call it toggle switch. And we'll save that now. And so now all we need to do is basically copy this over to our SD card that goes into our Ender3, and we can actually kick off this print. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so here we are at our 3D printer, our Ender3 Pro, and we are about to go and insert our SD. So we've just copied our job file onto the SD card here. So let's go put it in the front. Oops, goes upside down. Alright, and then we'll come over to our little touch panel over here. And let's go ahead and print from TF. And we'll choose our boat pole mount. And let's just let that heat up and go.
Hours later.
Okay, so after a few hours here, we've just gone through and our print has completed. So first thing we need to do is just remove it off the bed. So let's just go ahead here and just see if we can very carefully pop this off. There we go. Now you can see our support structures and our brim that it has made on our print. So we can basically just go ahead and remove these. So let's just take these off here. And they should just break away fairly easily depending on your printer, but generally the support structures come away pretty well. So let's just go and pop these off. We can tidy this one up in a bit, but let's have a look. Now at the bottom we've got where our hole is. Let's just push that in. There we go. And this is the main body of our switch here. So let's just go ahead now and we can go and see if our switch will fit nicely into this gap. So we have our toggle switch here. Let's just go and undo these threads. And we'll tighten this bottom thread all the way to the bottom here. And then let's pop this in our hole and let's see how well it fits and sits in here. Alright, so that's looking pretty good in there. So now all we need to do, we're just going to hold this backside straight. And then we're just going to apply our crush washer onto here. And then we're going to put our thread onto here. And then now we should be good to go. The only thing really left to do now is to put our waterproof switch cover over the top. And then we should be good to go. Let's just give this a quick test. Looking very good. And now we have plenty of space in here for us to be able to fit on our spade fittings and run our wiring. As you can see, we've got our channels on here for our cables. So this is looking very good. We're pretty much good to go. Let's go and attach these cables and put them on the boat. Alright, so we've got our switch now fully mounted up here with our cable ties attached. Let's just go ahead and give it a go, hey? Perfect. Beautiful.